Today I effed up by having a one-night stand with my psychotic neighbor. I can't believe I'm nearly 30 years old, but I've been stupid enough to find myself in such a messy, immature situation. I should know better by now. I just had a vulnerable moment of weakness, and now I'm paying the price. I'm a 29-year-old guy, and a few months ago I moved into a new apartment building. The place is the nicest home I've ever had, and my neighbors are kind enough people. When I was first moving in, the first neighbor I met lived on my floor. Her name was Christy, and she seemed delightful. She even had a habit of leaving me extra food whenever she cooked. She always claimed that she always made 2 big portions and was glad to share. Anyway, she was nice enough. I would thank her for the food in passing, and the most we spoke was having small talk in the hallway here and there. Anyway, things were great in my life a few months ago when I was first moving into my new place, but it was about an hour away from the town I lived in before. I needed to move closer to my job, but my girlfriend whom I had been with for almost 3 years still lived in my hometown. I can't explain just how heartbroken I was when I had only lived in my place for 2 months when my girlfriend said she wanted to break up. She said driving so far just to be able to see each other was exhausting her, and she didn't like how we only saw each other once a week now. She said she needed more, and even though she loved me she didn't want to be long distance. It felt like this came out of nowhere. I haven't personally thought the driving was too bad, but I guess she felt different. I was very deeply in love with her, and I still am. The night she left me I was a complete mess. I was in my apartment, alone, crying at the top of my lungs like a baby. I know it sounds dramatic for a grown man, but I was just so scared to be alone all over again. Anyways, I guess I had been crying pretty loud, because I got a knock at the door. When I opened it, there was Christy. She was holding a little plate of cookies and asked me if everything was okay. The question unzipped me, and I poured my guts out and cried to my sweet neighbor. She ended up coming inside, and we sat on my couch as I cried and vented to her. She rubbed my back and just listened. It was nice, it was what I needed. Here's where I effed up bad. I don't know what came over me. Like I said, it was just a really unfortunate moment of weakness, and I think I was just reaching out for any form of comfort. At one point, Christy hugged me and laid my head on her chest, and as awful as it sounds, I started to get turned on. The next thing I know, I made a move on her, and we were making out. We ended up having intimacy that night. I felt like a zombie. I would have done it with anyone, and I fought off tears the whole time since my breakup was so fresh. The very next day, I woke up early to the smell of breakfast. It turns out Christy had woken up early and made us breakfast. When I walked into the kitchen feeling like poop, she greeted me with a kiss and a huge smile. She was being nice, but it was too much, and I just wanted to be alone. I wasn't about to kick her out, so we had breakfast, and when she left I took a long nap. When I woke up, I opened my door to go outside and have a cigarette. That's when I saw a little gift basket on my doorstep. When I picked it up, it looked like it was a Valentine's Day theme. It was covered in little hearts. It had a teddy bear and chocolates and some Polaroids in it. When I looked closer at the Polaroids, I saw they were selfies that Christ had taken with me while I was sleeping. They looked so creepy. She had this big freaking smile on as she posed next to me. As if the photos weren't wrong enough, there was a card in the basket with a huge paragraph written into it. My stomach dropped as I read the card. It was completely unhinged. She started it out by writing our date in bubble letters and putting her heart around it. She then goes on to explain how happy she is to have me as her boyfriend and how perfect I am. She spoke a lot about how lonely she had been for so long, and how she had had a crush on me since I moved in. Oh Villies, the girl is a bit unhinged, and I've gotten myself into a real ship tea show. Yet I had zero idea how to let her down easily, but I guess there was no easy way to get through to someone like her. Today I effed up by having a one-night stand with my psychotic neighbor. In my first post, I explained that I had a one-night stand with my neighbor, and the next day, she left me a creepy gift basket, thanking me for becoming her boyfriend. I had literally broken up with my long-term girlfriend the same exact day that I hooked up with my neighbor, and I was in no place to start a brand new relationship, especially with a woman I barely knew. I knew I had to explain this all somehow to Christy, and I felt really guilty about what I had done, and I hoped she would be understanding. Well, I should have assumed she wouldn't take the news well, but I would have never predicted how poorly the confrontation would actually go. The day after we hooked up, I didn't see or hear from Christy all day until late afternoon when my doorbell rang. As soon as I heard it, I knew it had to be Christy, and I started getting anxious. When I opened the door, she leapt forward into my arms and gave me this big wet kiss. She immediately started rambling about her day and saying how much she missed me and how she wanted to make us dinner tonight to celebrate our new relationship. She was holding a grocery bag full of ingredients, and it was obvious she had her own plan for the night. I told her we had to talk, and I led her back to the couch to sit down. I didn't beat around the bush. I came right out and said the night before had been a mistake, and I didn't want a relationship with her. I told her I was sorry, but this was how I felt, and even though she was a nice girl, I didn't feel that way about her. She gave me this blank stare, and when I finished talking, she burst out laughing like an insane person. She literally threw her head back and laughed till she cried. I just stared at her, dumbfounded. Finally, she called me so funny and told me not to joke that way silly. Then, to my disbelief, she just got up and started cooking in my kitchen, humming loudly. I got up and followed her. I told her I wasn't joking and that we couldn't do this. She kept cooking and answered without looking at me. She told me I would stop talking crazy after I had something in my stomach. That's when I got frustrated and physically turned her to face me. I raised my voice a bit and told her I didn't want her here. I didn't want her as my girlfriend, and I was still in love with my ex, and I didn't want anyone else but her. That's when Christy's face finally fell. At first she looked hurt, but then her face twisted into anger in a snap second. I had never seen someone lose their cool like that, and she wasn't from cheery to mental patient in a second. She screamed in my face and asked me how I could make love to her if I didn't love her, and she asked me what my ex had that she didn't. She screamed and stomped her feet, and said my ex wasn't here, but she was, so why didn't I want her? I yelled at her again that I would never want her, and the only thing I wanted from her was for her to get the hell out of my apartment. This is when she totally snapped. She shrieked at the top of her lungs and started ripping my kitchen apart. She started throwing random kitchen utensils in my direction and crying and cursing me out. I tried to dodge everything, and I told her I was calling the cops. That's when she broke down even further. She fell on the floor and started ripping her hair out. It was by far the most terrifying thing I had ever seen someone do, and I called the cops in front of her. It felt like the longest 10 minutes of my life. She kept going back from ripping her hair to throwing things. She was screaming at me the whole time, and I was sure my other neighbors could hear the chaos. By the time the cops walked in, Christy had started throwing knives at me, and I was headed to the bathroom to barricade myself in. When the cops walked into my place and saw her holding 2 knives, ready to launch, they tackled her and arrested her on the spot. It was like something out of a movie. As they dragged her out, everyone came out of their apartments to watch, and Christy kept screaming, "But I love him. I love him." Until they shut her into the police car. She ended up spending a couple of nights in jail before I saw her back in the apartment building. Of course, I was extremely nervous to see her in the building again, and I had been offered a restraining order by the cops, which I turned down. I still felt like I had caused her breakdown, and I didn't want to ruin her life anymore. The freaky thing was, that I did end up seeing Christy in the hall about a week after the incident. She waved at me and smiled like nothing had happened. I guess I've learned a pretty unforgettable lesson about SHing where you eat, and I will never be hooking up with anyone I can't avoid from now on.